Well, Tulsi Gabbard proved to the world that she is not, in fact, a pacifist, and Kamala Harris proved to the world that she is a one-trick pony. So last night during the Democratic debates on CNN, Kamala Harris got the takedown from Tulsi Gabbard. She was absolutely not expecting that. Everybody had their guns aimed at Joe Biden. Everybody was trying to take him down. And Tulsi Gabbard came from behind and took out Kamala Harris, and it was amazing. It was fantastic. Well, now the backlash is that Kamala Harris's camp is really on the defensive, really going after Tulsi Gabbard, trying to smear her as an Assad apologist. We've heard this before, and they're going for it now. So first of all, I want to play for you the exchange of what exactly went down.
I want to bring the conversation back to the broken criminal justice system that is disproportionately negatively impacting Black and brown people all across this country today. Now, Senator Harris says she's proud of her record as a prosecutor and that she'll be a prosecutor president, but I'm deeply concerned about this record. There are too many examples to cite, but she put over 1,500 people in jail for marijuana violations and then laughed about it when she was asked if she ever smoked marijuana. She blocked evidence. She blocked evidence that would have freed an innocent man from death row until the courts forced her to do so. She kept people in prison beyond their sentences to use them as cheap labor for the state of California. And she fought to keep cash bail system in place that impacts poor people in the worst kind of way.
Yikes. So let's go over that just one by one here. So she talks about marijuana and putting over 1,500 people in jail for marijuana and then admitting to using it herself and laughing about it. That is true. The state of California, during Kamala Harris's time as the Attorney General of the state, put over 1,560 people behind bars for marijuana use. And Kamala Harris did say that she was against the legalization of marijuana in 2014 when she was being interviewed when she was campaigning. And she also recently, while campaigning for president, she went on The Breakfast Club and admitted to smoking pot and apparently listening to Snoop or no, she was saying that she was listening to, who was it that she said she listened to? That it was like there was just no way. Tupac. I think that Tupac wasn't even around when she was in college, so it was kind of one of those, we don't know. So that was true. She also, Tulsi has accused her of blocking evidence that would have exonerated a man on death row, an innocent man on death row. That is still to be determined. But what happened was there's a man, and this is actually really bad, but there is a man who's been sitting on death row. When Kamala Harris was the prosecutor on his case, she blocked evidence testing evidence. He was requesting a DNA test, and she essentially refused to get the DNA test, which to me is very strange. Why wouldn't you want science to step in and see if somebody's innocent or guilty? The reason is because the criminal justice system is very broken. Kamala Harris took part in its brokenness, and prosecutors and DAs get they get pats on the back for putting people in jail for heinous crimes. And if they haven't caught the perpetrator, it looks really bad on them, and they don't end up keeping their jobs or they don't get reelected. So it is a big problem that prosecutors and DAs often, I don't know how often, but often enough for it to be a bit of a problem, will blame crimes on innocent people. And often those people are people of color. Now, this person has requested the DNA tests. Now the DNA tests are finally being taken, and the evidence is going to be looked at. But this guy, when this was going on, this was back in 2004, and now it's 2019. So this guy has been sitting behind bars for 15 years, when Kamala Harris 15 years ago maybe had the opportunity to exonerate this man and chose not to. So I think it's a pretty heinous crime if it turns out that this guy is in fact innocent, and there is apparently enough evidence to suggest that he is, because Gavin Newsom has now ordered that DNA test. If it turns out this guy's innocent, then it's really bad that Kamala Harris potentially allowed this man to sit behind bars for 15 years. Now, I don't know about you, but for me, that is the worst thing you could do to somebody, is to lock them up, an innocent person, and allow them to rot behind bars. That to me is worse than any insult Trump could sling or any of the many misdeeds that Trump has been accused of, forcing a person to sit and rot behind bars, an innocent person, and stealing that many years of their life is pretty heinous. But that is still yet to be determined. Gabbard also accused her of using inmates for free labor. So what this was is that in the state of California, there's pretty much a precedent that if you're a good inmate and you get sentenced, let's say for 3 years, then you can get out a bit early, on good behavior, and they will pretty much not commute your sentence, but they'll just release you early because you're clogging up the system. They have they have dangerous people to put in there, and maybe you're not one of them. And so her office actually advocated to keep the prisoners in jail longer than they normally would be in order to use them as firefighters for California wildfires. And the argument they used was that the wildfires were going so crazy, and they were so damaging to the state, and they were so important to fight that they just couldn't release these inmates. They needed to use them for firefights, which I didn't know they were using inmates to fight fires, and that's worse than I thought when they were talking about using them for labor, because you're asking somebody to put their life on the line to fight a fire, a wildfire. You're shoving this person out there, and you're saying, and they're imprisoned, and you're telling them you have to go and fight this fire. Are you kidding me? That's way worse than I thought when I was thinking of forced labor. I'm thinking like cleaning up trash off the side of the highway. I didn't realize these guys were fighting fires. So those are the things that Tulsi Gabbard is talking about. And what this showed when Kamala Harris, when it was thrown back to her, she basically just said, look, I'm proud of my record. I was serving a state of 40 million people. We transformed the criminal justice system. We did a lot of work, and I'm proud of it. Which is fine if you're not running on a campaign of, I'm here to serve civil rights and justice for Black and brown people, which has been her entire campaign. She says that, Shirley Chisholm is her idol, and who was this wonderful, fantastic congresswoman who really fought for economic justice and racial justice back in the 70s and 60s and 70s. So if you're running on that message of I'm a civil rights activist, and yet you're throwing people in prison and you're keeping people behind bars and you're using inmates for firefights, it doesn't really bode well, right? It's not really consistent. But nothing Kamala Harris has said so far has been consistent with her campaign. She's been the biggest flip-flopper of this entire campaign so far. I'm surprised she's doing as well as she has, considering how big of a flip-flopper she is on the issues. She hasn't held firm to anything, even busing. Even when she went after Joe Biden for busing, she went on AP News a couple of days later and she was interviewed and said that, actually she agrees with the fact that it shouldn't be federally mandated, which Joe Biden held her, he called her out on that during the debates last night. So the woman is just a giant flip-flopper. Now, what this really exposed about Kamala Harris is that she has spent her entire career as a prosecutor, meaning she has sat on one side and her job has been to point fingers and to place blame on everybody else. That's been the job. So what Tulsi Gabbard exposed is that she cannot take any hits. She just simply can't. So if people believe that Kamala Harris, because she's this prosecutor and she's going to go in there and she's going to go after Trump and she's going to go hard, well, part of the debates and part of campaigning is that Trump gets to hit you back. And that's not normal for a prosecutor. The person that's sitting on the stand who's facing charges doesn't get to turn around and start looking into the prosecutor's life. They don't get to examine the prosecutor and put them on the stand and put them on trial. That's not the way it works. So Kamala Harris has never been on that side of it. And now she is. And what has she shown? She's shown that she can't fight back. She has no real standing ground. I saw an article in CNN saying, or maybe it was, all the news sites. It's been really interesting because they've really put out a lot of pieces supporting Tulsi Gabbard, taking Kamala down, and then going after Tulsi and supporting Kamala. It's been really interesting to see the dynamic in the mainstream news. It's been kind of refreshing that they haven't all been taking Kamala's side. But one of them said she had a glass jaw, and that is absolutely right. She does. She has a glass jaw. Now, after the debates, here's what I mean. Kamala Harris launches an attack on Tulsi after the debates. Now, she couldn't think on her feet during the debates because she's not used to being in this position. But after the debates, she said two things that really stood out. Here they are.
I mean, listen, this is going to sound immodest, but I'm obviously a top-tier candidate, and so I did expect that I would be on the stage and take hits tonight because there are a lot of people that are trying to make the stage for the next debate.
Yeah, for a lot of them, it's do or die.
Well, yeah, and especially when people are at 0 or 1% or whatever she might be at. And so I did expect that I might take hits tonight. But, you know, listen, I think that this coming from someone who has been an apologist for an individual, Assad, who has murdered the people of his country like cockroaches. She who has embraced and been an apologist for him in a way that she refuses to call him a war criminal. I can only take what she says in her opinion so seriously. And so I'm prepared to move on.
What a bitch. I'm sorry. I mean, look, the first thing she says is, this is going to sound immodest, but she's a 0 to 1%, and I'm a top tier candidate. So, of course, she's going to do what she can to try to take me down. I mean, yeah, that did sound immodest, Kamala. And secondly, then she goes and says, and, you know, I can't take the opinion of an Assad apologist all that seriously, a man who murdered his people like cockroaches. Now, some people I saw on the news today and in the mainstream were saying that Kamala Harris, maybe on the debate stage, she didn't want to hit Tulsi Gabbard about Assad on the debate stage. And people were saying, and I can understand why she wouldn't want to do that. And so instead, she did it later on cable news. But the truth is, Kamala didn't think about this. This came from her press secretary. So let me show you. During the debates, her press secretary was tweeting Ian Sams. And while this was going on, he tweeted this: "Yo, you love Assad, #DemDebate." So this was coming directly from her press secretary. He went on to tweet during the debates. He retweeted this one from Michael Colbruno. "It's an honor if Tulsi Gabbard, the friend of Syrian dictator and murderer Bashar al-Assad, is attacking you." He continued to tweet throughout the night, "It's a lie offered up by an Assad apologist." When Kat Stafford wrote, Tulsi Gabbard hit Kamala Harris's prosecution record pretty hard. When you were in a position to make a difference in people's lives, you did not. Gabbard, #DemDebate too. He also, shortly after the debate, wrote, knowing that the backlash was coming, tweeted this out: "Reporters writing their stories with eyes on the modern-day assignment desk of Twitter, read this." Quote, "The Russian propaganda machine that tried to influence the 2016 election is now promoting the presidential aspirations of a controversial Hawaii Democrat." And he linked to the article claiming that Tulsi Gabbard was being supported by Russians. Now, her campaign, Ian Sams, has continued the attacks today on his Twitter account. He has gone nonstop. The last I checked, he was still tweeting about this right now. And she has continued to go on the defensive. I saw Kamala Harris earlier today on CNN, again talking about Assad, again talking about the fact that Tulsi Gabbard met with Assad. And that has then been the trending discussion on Twitter, the trending discussions in mainstream news. And again, like I mentioned in my last video, if you didn't watch it, mainstream news is not real news. Mainstream news is looking for ratings. They're sensational. They're looking for headlines that get clicks. It's clickbait. It's meant to get viewers' attention. So they focus on anything that is going to be attention grabbing. Now, I want to play this last clip for you. This is an exchange. Tulsi has been making the rounds today, and she was on MSNBC, and this one got pretty heated as she was being asked about meeting with Assad. I'm going to play this whole clip for you.
Look, I want to break this down to what we're talking about.
It's really a yes or no answer.
I want to break this down to what we're talking about here today, because you're talking about a meeting that took place 3 years ago?
Well, Congresswoman,
and every time I come back here on MSNBC, you guys talk to me about these issues. It sounds like these are talking points that Kamala Harris and her campaign are feeding you because she's refusing to address the questions that were posed to her.
Congresswoman, it's important, I think, for the American people to have context about your foreign policy issues and where you stand. If you're leading with foreign policy and you're running for the president of the United States, a meeting with Bashar al-Assad, which I'm sure you understand is a very controversial meeting to take. Hence the reason why when you come on MSNBC, it is important for us to talk to you about that. And of course, every anchor has a different perspective and different questions to ask of you.
Every
so
single time for 3 years. This is where the propaganda comes in, because I've talked about this a lot for the last 3 years. And I've talked about how as a soldier, I served in a field medical unit in Iraq, where every single day I saw the very high human cost of war. Every single day, the first thing that I did was go through a list name by name of every single American casualty and injury that had occurred the day before. So I will not apologize to you or to anyone for doing all that let me finish, okay. For doing all that I can to prevent our country from continuing to make these perpetual wrong decisions that have taken a toll on the lives of my brothers and sisters in uniform. I will continue to do all that I can to make sure that we end these wasteful regime change wars that have taken such a toll on all of us and that have made our country less safe. And if that means having a meeting with a dictator, if that means trying to meet with Kim Jong-un in North Korea to de-escalate tensions and remove this nuclear threat from our country and our people, whatever the crisis is, we've got to have a leader with the courage to do the right thing for the American people, putting their interests ahead of everything else. That is what I'm focused on. And that's what's at the center of my foreign policy and the leadership that I'll bring as president.
I certainly am not asking you to apologize for your service. I'm very thankful for your service at that. And I don't think anybody is asking you to apologize for your service. This is more a conversation and asking you questions to explain the decisions that you've made in the past and the statements that you've made in the past with regards to your foreign policy views as you are running for president of the United States. Congresswoman, I thank you for your time. Tulsi Gabbard, very much appreciate your time.
I mean, look, that whole exchange was very heated. Tulsi multiple times said, let me finish. I really liked that Tulsi was showing a bit more spirit. I could tell that she was way more annoyed about this. And I know she is probably, I don't know, but I would imagine that she's very annoyed by these attacks. This once again digging up the meeting with Assad. To me, the meeting with Assad is a no-brainer. If the man invites you to meet, you go. If you're a member of Congress, it is your obligation to go and meet with these leaders around the world. I saw people saying, well, no, that's the job of the president, that she shouldn't have gone without. Some people were saying without presidential authorization. Excuse me, let me give you a little civics lesson. The United States Congress is an equal but separate branch of government, equal to the branch of the executive, equal to the United States president, and they're separate. They have to do their checks and balances. Part of the problem as to why we've marched into all of these regime change wars is because all too often our other branches of government that should have been doing checks and balances just believed everything they were told. It is absolutely the responsibility of congressional members to go and do their due diligence. They are the body that declares war. They are the body that gives the authorization to the president to go into armed conflict. So, yeah, it is her job to go and do that. And if she's going and checking out what is going on in Syria, which, by the way, hardly any journalists have done, and very few of our congressional leaders or any leaders have gone, people aren't going. They're just listening to what they're hearing and what they're saying, and they're believing it. And Tulsi Gabbard, with all of the honor and integrity that she has as a person, decides that she is going to go and find out for herself rather than believe the narratives. Because you know what? Do you remember Iraq? Do you remember weapons of mass destruction? You would be an idiot, honestly, and a genuine idiot, if you genuinely just would say, well, you know what? Let's just go ahead and trust everything again. You know that there were no weapons of mass destruction. We know this. So why would you believe any other narratives without doing the investigating yourself, especially if you're a member of the United States Congress? That is your job. Tulsi Gabbard does her job. And then people scream about it. They can't believe that she's doing her job. They just can't believe it. They want her to believe the executive branch and the Pentagon and the people that marched us into Iraq. That's what you want, honestly? Honestly? I mean, that just doesn't make any sense to me. So these attacks about Assad, guys, you know, you need to get over it, because you're the reason we've continued to have all of the wars time and time again. And it's not just the war since 9/11 that we've been in for the last nearly 20 years. It was the wars before that. It was the war that tore my family up in Vietnam. It was all of these wars that we've marched around in, all of the regime changes that we have engaged in, all of the destabilizing that we have done. And it is because people believe, maybe you're one of those people who actually just believes that, yeah, you know what? These bad dictators need to be taken out. We've got to go and save the people. Yeah, like we did in Libya. Right? We took out Gaddafi because he was really bad. He was like Bashar al-Assad. He was so bad. And now look at what's going on in Libya. They have an open slave market. The people are not better off. In Afghanistan, when we went in to topple the government that was being backed by the Russians, you know, like, oh, they're Tulsi Gabbard backed by the Russians. The people in Afghanistan, their government was backed by the Russians. We went in there in the 70s. We armed the Mujahideen, who ended up becoming Al-Qaeda and the Taliban, and we left Afghanistan with the Taliban. We left those women who were previously liberated under the Taliban, where they could no longer get an education after the age of 8, where they could no longer see a doctor because the doctor was male, and, well, women can't get educations after 8, so women just die. That is what we do. And then when you want to sit there and continue to advocate for this by saying, well, no, you better call him a dictator. You better call him a brutal dictator. Why can't you just say it? Why can't you just say it? You know why? Because the minute you say it, you're implying that we need to go to war. That is what you're implying. You're implying that we need to go and take them out and leave the Syrian people in the hands of the radicals that infiltrated the country that had been destabilized and were ready to take over the same way the Taliban took over Afghanistan. That would be on you. So shame on all of these people on Twitter who cannot learn a lesson, who apparently can't read history books or the news or do research or understand that the United States has engaged in pretty dismal foreign policy for quite some time. Shame on ya. And good for Tulsi Gabbard for standing her ground and never backing down and not being a flip-floppy, wishy-washy like Kamala Harris. Very, very proud of Tulsi and how she has stood up for us. She stood up for us. Thank you so much for watching. Don't know if this video is going to stay up because I don't know how they're handling the clips. It is really a shame that CNN and MSNBC and all of these networks are kind of, especially with the debates when they were streaming, when people were streaming them, they were forcing them to take those streams down. That to me should be not allowed. It should be because the debates should be for public consumption and not for only people who have cable. But with these clips, sometimes they flag these videos and they force us to take them down. So we'll see how long this one lasts. But thank you so much for watching. If you would like to support this show, I would appreciate it. I often get demonetized whenever I talk about things like Assad, war, terrorism, Iran, North Korea. All of those tend to get demonetized. My links are down below, Patreon and PayPal. Thank you so much for your support.